Okay, so before I proceed any further, I'm going to import some more geometry. And here I'm going to create a context called architecture. And let's do file, import geometry, architecture. And this contains a lot of my arches, minarets, piers, towers, and temples that I showed you in an earlier video. So feel free to organize these a little bit better in your project, again, depending on how big of a project you're working on and whether you think you will get confused between all of this, but it will be okay, at least for now, I think. And let's take these arches. Actually, let's have a look at them on an object level, and I will want to take a couple of these and determine which of them would work the best for my scenario here. And I'm trying to think about this scale here because I want these to be really big, and some of them, for example this, has elements within it that are obviously of a certain scale. These lamps are not going to be, 5 meters long or anything like that if I make this a gigantic arch. So maybe this would be too obvious that it's at the wrong scale, but maybe one of them will be okay. This one, again, might be too obvious, but for example, this has no discerning features. This arch could be any size, really, so I quite like this. Here, this has all of the roof tiles, which obviously are a normal roof tile size, as does this, but I think I'll take this one as well and then try to disguise the fact that these are not the correct scale later on. And you will see in a second what I mean by correct scale. So let me take 3 and 1, and I'll just instantiate them. And if you have both selected, you can change the attributes for both at once. So let's localize the translation, rotation, and scale. And let's drop them in this folder. Again, let's select to view this. Okay, so here, these are more or less the correct scale. Actually, might be still too big, because an average house that I have in this scene, the model might be around this big. So these are actually already gigantic, and I want them to be gigantic, but I have to be mindful of the fact that they were not created to be that scale. So I'll have to be careful when I'm painting to hide that fact that they are the wrong scale. So let's take one of these, and let's rotate it 90 degrees this way. And let's place it here, and let's make it even bigger. And these are not unbelievably large. There do exist arches of this scale in the world, but we have to just make sure that the details we have on them sell the scale correctly, because humans are very good at noticing when something is the wrong scale, and they might, if they're not an expert artist, they might not know what is wrong, but they will feel that something is not right. So we have to be very careful here with these. Let's make this bigger here, and let's put this here like this, and we could even expand it this way. Okay, and don't worry too much about this. We can adjust this slightly, and this will be in the shadow. It's not going to be too visible. It won't be a big problem. This, however, let's make a copy, and let's rotate this 90 degrees, and let's just put it here. Cool. And maybe even another one that we could put here. Cool. Okay. I think let's take one of these. Yeah, maybe that one. And let's just copy it. And let's move it here. I want to very roughly close this gap, I think. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Something like this, maybe. Okay. And let's go back to our architecture folder. And let's pick up our steps and make an instance. And again, let's localize these factors. Attributes, rather. And let's throw this in here as well. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Okay, let's move this here. And let's have a quick look through our render camera. We can make this wider. Okay. So currently we have nothing underneath it, so let's just take one of our cubes and let's just copy and put it underneath. This again doesn't have to be detailed because no one will really notice what is underneath. It's so low in the image, and if we put a little bit of texture on it, it'll be okay. You gotta be thinking very efficiently. What is this easiest way of doing everything, right? And the quickest, especially when you're working by yourself and you don't have a team. And we've already discussed this. You want to find the quickest, best cheats to achieve the highest quality work in the time that you have. So here, again, let's take our steps. And let's just create a copy of the instance. And put these here. Okay, that's quite cool. And let's just take them again. Let's rotate 90 degrees. Oops, not 90. Not 909, sorry. 90. Move them here. Maybe make them a little bit slimmer. Cool. And then, again, let's think of a creative solution of what to put underneath these. So, we could take perhaps one of these and copy it. And let's just make it really wide. Okay. Maybe angle it this way. And we have to be thinking logically, so these steps have to lead to something. So let's leave this area where people can walk down, and then maybe go here. And shape it like this. Again, here we've got crazy things going on at the bottom, but no one will see this far down. And actually, we can take our steps, rotate them back to 0. Make another copy here, so people walk down from the temple, walk down these steps. Always try to think of what would be the function of anything you're placing if you're creating a city, because everything is built with a function, whether the architect meant it that way or whether it's just something that has naturally evolved as the city was built, because people follow the laws of nature in terms of paths of least resistance, things like that. So everything that you make, you gotta think, okay, this is where people would walk. Why would they build things this way? Why would they build things that way? And if you do that and honestly think of all of the things you're creating and why you're making some creative decisions beyond the fact that, oh, this looks cool or that looks great, you will end up with a better image because it will be functional. And at the end of the day, cities have to be functional, right? So let's make another copy of this and rotate it 180 degrees. And we'll just put this here. So here we have some problems, but they will not be visible. If we look through our render cam, that looks like it makes some sort of sense. Okay. Let's take our bottom box as well. Maybe let's make it a little bit wider. So our structure gets thinner as you go towards the top. An extreme example would be the pyramids, right? So for structures that are this heavy, made of stone, you would have a very big base, broad base, and then it tapers off as you reach the top, because otherwise the entire structure would collapse under its own weight. And without modern materials, people were not able to build things purely straight. So everything had to taper off somewhat. And I mean, I know this is a fantasy piece, but if you ground it slightly in reality, we can pretend that they have some sort of magic or some sort of science fiction tools that we don't, but it's nice to sort of make a little bit of sense. So let's go with that. Actually, let's take one of these tech pieces again, and maybe let's block off this side a little bit. And oops, let's localize the scale. Otherwise, here's an example. Before I localize the scale, if I scale this, you can see that the original also becomes scaled. So if we localize it, we can do this, and that doesn't happen. So let's just block off this side, I think. Maybe I'll want to move this down a little bit, create a little bit more space here. And here up top, let's create an area of interest. So the way I'm thinking is, if this is some temple or something like that, usually in a lot of these scenarios in these sort of cities, poor people live at the bottom, and then the higher you go up, you get richer areas. So here we could create some sort of a garden. So let's just have a look in our architecture folder. We go here. Let's find the facades. No, actually, I just want to view the object. Yep, that's the one I want. Let's instantiate this, and localize it. And we'll put this in here. Let's go back here. Yeah, and I'm thinking these sort of columns, they're a very recognizable architecture piece. And like I showed you at the start in my reference selection part of this video, columns are something that appears quite regularly in this sort of architecture. So it's a good idea to have them a lot here, and they're a constant sort of object that we can then use to help people determine the scale of everything, because people have a rough idea that this is one floor, right? So we could make this a little bit smaller maybe. Let's put it here. Okay, let's move all of these down as well. Great. Okay, that works better, I think. And here, let's copy this. And let's create a little bit of an interesting area here. Hopefully, you know, by making this slightly more unique than the rest of the image, by adding these sort of columns, I will be able to draw people's attention to this, and it'll be something slightly more interesting to look at. Alright, let's copy it once more. And let's change that to 90 degrees. Let's match it over here. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because at this distance you're not going to be able to tell a lot of the little problems. But just as long as it's good enough so that we can use the geometry as a base and then overpaint it, that's good enough for us, right? Flip this the other way and move it here. Let's just complete this little garden area. Cool. And we can actually copy this once more maybe. And put it here. Let's just widen this a little bit. Okay, that's quite interesting. That looks like something that was planned and constructed. I like it. Let's put one of these here. Maybe like that. Awesome. Maybe another one. I quite like these. If we do it there like that, and let's copy. We can make an entire row of these. And that's a nice little detail, right? I think so. Let's look at this through our camera. Okay. So, if you remember, in the original scattered version of this, I had that big vertical sort of building structure over here. So, what we could do is copy this over here. Oh, oops. Again, I need to localize the rotation and the scale. And let's just rotate it this way. 0. And this way, so minus 90. And let's put it above here. And the most important thing is to be very loose with this. If you make something that doesn't look great, and you get a better idea, redo it, because you might waste a little bit of time now, but it's better to waste a little bit of time now than to create something that in the long run doesn't look very interesting. And it's not going to look in your portfolio, right? As long as you realize that there's a better way to do it. Of course, you will improve as you go along and become better as an artist. And you'll always find mistakes in your older works. But and there's no helping that. But in the meantime, if you do find something that could be improved, even if it takes a little bit of time and you have to change something that you're committed to, I would recommend it. We could move these in here a little bit, like so. And maybe let's copy them. And again here, I'm just creating a base to put other objects on later. So here, maybe we could have something interesting there. We could, for example, copy this and create something like that. That's kind of cool. Maybe let's copy it again and flip it upside down. That could be anything, I like it. This is not exactly like my original piece, but the principles are the same. The thing is, if I had made my original artwork even a day later, it might look different in some regards, but the main idea would still be the same. It's just little parts of it that would change as I'm coming up with them on the fly. These ideas don't have to be perfect. And there's no perfect solution. There's a million different ways you could construct this building, and they're all interesting. And there's no right way to do it. There's just having the imagination as you go along, right? So here, let's connect these two by just making a cylinder. Bring this over here, and we'll enable caps. And if you've missed the earlier video, the caps are just here. And we are completing the structure. And let's bring this here. And I'm again playing into this in a way where the two things intersect, but I'm not worrying about that. I can overpaint it later, and it is quite far away from the camera. Earlier, if you remember, we talked about how if things are far away, we don't have to put in as much detail. You can get away with a lot more. Let's do this. Let's just copy this a few times. And we have a slightly more interesting shape. In here we can copy these once more and just extend them this way. And remember, I will be putting... That's quite cool. I'll be putting shanties and balconies and trees all over this building anyway, so this just acts as a base currently. So let's take these cylinders and combine them. And if we click Control H to hide them, and then just look at our combiner, this now is a combination of all three of those cylinders. And we can just copy this and move it here. And let's copy both again and move them here. And maybe once more, put this here. And let's just change it up a bit. Actually, let's take all of these and lift them up a little bit. What I'm trying to do here is create just a little bit of a difference between these two. We can move these down slightly. So this and this. So they're at slightly different heights, and I'm creating a slight little bit of visual interest. Right? So it looks like they're going slightly in a circle, in a curve. So higher, lower, lower, higher. Cool, right? It's just the little things. Let's select these again. Let's put a copy here, and yeah, and another copy here. These aren't connecting to anything, but we're not going to see that. So that looks pretty cool. Okay, so let's jump to our next video, in which we will be adding some temples on our building, maybe here, and perhaps some extra activity around this area here.